On the frozen banks of the Volga River, in the year 921 AD, the wind cut like knives through layers of fur. A gray dawn spread its pale light over the Viking encampment, where smoke from low campfires drifted into the endless winter sky. Ahmad Ibn Fadlan, a learned ambassador from the distant city of Baghdad, stood apart from the bustle, his fine robes and dark beard marking him as a man of another world. He had traveled thousands of miles across deserts and mountains, through forests and frozen plains, sent by his caliph to speak with northern tribes. But nothing, not the brutal winters, not the strange customs of nomads, not the fierce hospitality of warriors, could have prepared him for what he was about to witness. Before him lay a scene that would challenge every boundary of his faith, his understanding, and even his sense of human nature. A Viking chieftain had died far from his Scandinavian home, and now his people prepared a funeral unlike anything Ibn Fadlan had ever imagined, a ritual that would blend beauty and horror, violence and intimacy, into a single, unbroken ceremony. For 10 days, life and death would blur together. The living would dance with the dead, flesh would meet fire, and blood would be spilled not in battle, but as an offering to the gods. And at the center of it all, a young slave girl, no more than 18, had already chosen her fate, to follow her master into the next world, through a death as strange as it was terrible. Ibn Fadlan would record every detail, and more than 1,000 years later, his account would still disturb and fascinate in equal measure. The chieftain's body lay in a shallow, temporary grave, the frost already gathering on his long beard. For now, there was no gold on him, no armor, only a simple shroud. His warriors stood silently in the cold, their breath misting in the air, their eyes lowered. They knew this was not the final resting place. The true funeral, the one that would open the gates to Valhalla, would require time. 10 days of preparation, 10 days of fire, blood, and ritual. The Vikings believed that a great man could not pass into the afterlife unaccompanied. His ship must be filled with wealth, his animals must follow him, and a companion, the living soul, must travel beside him into the world of the dead. That companion had already been chosen. Among the gathered slaves, one girl, barely 18, had stepped forward. She would give her life willingly, she said, to serve her master beyond the grave. Ibn Fadlan, who had watched prisoners in distant lands beg for mercy, could not comprehend the calm with which she accepted her fate. The Vikings accepted it without question. To them, this was not cruelty, it was honor. That night, the rituals began. The girl was seated at the center of the gathering, a carved wooden cup pressed into her hands. Inside was a drink brewed from fermented grains, sweetened with honey, and laced with hallucinogenic herbs. She drank deeply, the bitter warmth sliding down her throat. Around her, warriors raised drinking horns high, their voices echoing in chants older than their language. Drums thumped like the slow beat of a heart, steady and relentless. The firelight flickered across the faces of men and women who watched her closely. Every day for the next week, she would drink. She would eat little, sleep less, and take part in ceremonies meant to prepare her for the journey ahead. The alcohol would blur the edges of her fear. The herbs would open her mind to visions of the world beyond. Ibn Fadlan noted each movement, each sound, each shadow. He saw the girl's eyes begin to change, dilating, wandering, as if she were already seeing another place entirely. The Vikings smiled when they saw it. To them, it meant the transformation had begun. In the days that followed, the girl became the center of the Viking world. Every important man in the camp came to her tent, one after another. Ibn Fadlan observed this with a mixture of fascination and unease. It was not the rough violence he had seen in other lands, this was something different. Each warrior touched her, spoke to her, whispered words meant to guide her into the next life. Some offered her tokens, a carved amulet, a silver bead, to carry into the afterlife, believing she would speak their names to the gods. She was no longer just a slave. In their eyes, she had become a bridge between worlds, a living vessel of spiritual power. Her laughter came easily now, sometimes mixed with tears that she could not explain. Ibn Fadlan wrote that she seemed to walk into worlds at once, present in the tent, but with her mind already crossing the river to Valhalla. On the 5th day, the great ship was brought ashore. Dozens of men heaved on ropes, their boots grinding into the snow. The ship's dragon-headed prow rose high into the gray winter sky, a symbol of power even in death. This vessel would carry the chieftain to the afterlife. It would also carry his weapons, his gold, his animals, and the girl who had chosen to follow him. Horses stood nearby, their breath steaming in the cold. Dogs growled softly, sensing what was to come. Falcons, hooded and restless, shifted on their perches. Ibn Fadlan knew that none of them would see another dawn. On the sixth day, the chieftain was brought from his temporary grave. The frost had hardened his features, but his people treated him as if he still commanded their respect. His body was washed in fragrant water. Gold arm rings were slipped onto his wrists. A finely embroidered tunic was drawn over his shoulders, followed by gleaming armor. A heavy fur cloak was draped around him, its edges dusted with snow. A sword, polished until it shone like ice, was laid across his chest. Rings of gold, beads of amber, and silver coins were placed at his side, the wealth of a chief who had traveled far and traded well. Ibn Fadlan noticed the way their hands moved over the body. Not with sorrow, but with pride. This was not the end, they believed. This was the beginning of his journey to Valhalla. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the first sacrifices began. A black horse was led forward, its breath clouding in the frozen air. A swift blade, a shudder, and the animal fell into the snow, its lifeblood steaming in the cold. More followed, another horse, a dog, a falcon. Their bodies were placed carefully on the ship, near the place where the chieftain would lie. Ibn Fadlan watched in silence, the sound of the animals' cries fading into the low chanting of the Vikings. The air smelled of blood and wood smoke, a mingling of life and death. By now, the girl lived almost entirely in another world. Her eyes were heavy, her speech slurred, her laughter sudden and without cause. The drink and the herbs kept her in a haze, and the rituals never stopped. One by one, the chieftain's kin came to her. Some touched her forehead, whispering blessings. Others clasped her hands, placing small tokens for her to carry into the afterlife. Ibn Fadlan saw no shame in their faces, no cruelty. For them, this was sacred duty. The girl was not a victim, she was a vessel, a bridge to their fallen chief. On the 10th day, the air was still. Snow lay untouched around the ship, now resting on a towering wooden pyre. Inside, the chieftain lay among gold, weapons, food, and the bodies of his animals. The girl was brought forward by two women. She wore fine garments, her hair woven with beads and silver wire. Her pupils were wide, her face serene. Ibn Fadlan felt the cold seep into his bones as he realized what would happen next. This was the day she would die. She was called the Angel of Death, a tall woman with long braided hair, her face painted in dark spirals. Her black cloak stirred in the wind, and in her hand, she held a long dagger. It was her duty to guide the girl into the next world, not with kindness, but with ritual precision. Ibn Fadlan could not take his eyes from her. She moved with calm purpose, as though every step had been walked 100 times before. The girl was led up onto the ship, where the chieftain's body waited. She lay down beside him, resting her head on his chest. Warriors gathered close, their chants deep and rhythmic. The Angel of Death leaned over her, whispering something no one else could hear. Then the rope was looped around her neck. She gasped once, not in fear, but in final surrender. The dagger flashed, her body jerked once, then stilled. The chants did not stop. The fire was lit at sunset, flames roared upward, devouring wood, flesh, and gold alike. Naked warriors ran around the pyre, their bodies smeared in blood. Some tore pieces of raw meat from sacrificed animals, eating as they chanted. Others fell into frenzied embraces, believing each act gave strength to the chieftain's spirit. The heat was so intense that Ibn Fadlan could feel it on his face from where he stood. The air was thick with the smell of burning flesh and pine resin. By dawn, nothing remained but ashes and twisted metal. The snow began to fall again, soft and silent, covering the last traces of the fire. The Vikings stood quietly, their work complete. Their chief was gone, carried into the next world by fire, blood, and sacrifice. In his tent, Ibn Fadlan took up his pen. He wrote down every detail, his words steady despite the images still burning in his mind. He admitted his revulsion, but also his strange admiration. The Vikings faced death without fear. They met it with fire, with flesh, and with the uncheckable belief that their dead would live again. And so, on the frozen banks of the Volga, a man died twice, once in the world of the living, and once in the arms of fire. A girl gave her life for a promise of eternity. The Vikings called it honor. Ibn Fadlan called it something else, a vision of human nature at its most extreme. More than 1,000 years later, his words still burn with the memory of that night. The ship, the fire, the chance that would not end, and the belief that death, no matter how brutal, could be beautiful. Good night.